I was inspired today because of this comment. It is asking a question that I had never thought about before, which is, what if the current generation of kids that are born today grow up without any need to read? And what if we actually didn't teach them how to read because they had artificial intelligence to basically synthesize anything that was ever written into a book or anything that was ever printed? What would a world look like where kids don't need to learn to read anymore? And I think intuitively we all know we should still teach kids to read even if AI is advancing really quickly. But just as a thought experiment, let's think about how artificial intelligence might evolve and ask ourselves, what is the point of learning to read? And what would happen to a society where an entire generation grew up never learning to read, but also having amazing artificial intelligence tools to help them? And of course, I'm not advocating for that, but I know the kids that are born today, by the time they become 16, 17, they're not going to need a driver's license unless they want one. Self-driving tech will be so normal, I'm not sure a lot of people will bother at that time, and I'm just kind of imagining, what if we extend that all the way out to reading? Why would a child ever need to take a foreign language in school? Just learn one language and have artificial intelligence translate. It'll give you access to information from across the world. And of course, the immediate answer is, well, it's just healthy. Even if you don't need to read, learn. If you don't need a pencil, just still learn how to write. But realistically, I can imagine a really comprehensive education that actually doesn't involve reading. I imagine it could be powered by a virtual assistant. A child would absolutely have to know, a certain language, let's say English, and it could talk to them the way they could talk to their elders or parents. But a non-written education could involve debate, mathematics, science, coding, social intelligence could absolutely be built. It's just that when a child comes across a textbook, they would hold it up and say to their phone or their virtual assistant or their AI, augmented glasses, tell me what this book is about and synthesize out any important information that you think I need to know. And then you could even say, and find a way to teach that to me in a way that sticks in my mind and helps me become a better person. At that point, the AI could probably generate images and videos and a VR experience, or it could say, go talk to this person and have a debate about blank. And you could actually get all that same information because it's not just about the text, it's about what that book actually meant, what it was for, what it had inside of it that we need to learn. The AI is actually answering something even more fundamental, something that books and teachers don't always capture but strive for. What is it that the student actually needs to succeed in life, to be an entrepreneur, to be confident, to go out there and try and build things, to be happy? And I'm going to assume if AI is on the verge of driving cars and being inside robots and building virtual worlds for us, it can start to answer that question. And who knows what an artificial intelligent education even looks like? If we leave it in control and it becomes super intelligent, then I doubt I could even compare it to what we've done in the past. And it's intriguing to think about what that means for us. That might be one of the greatest things ever. It could also push us so far away from what the normal human instinct is that maybe we won't love it, but I'm not really going to be able to tell until it actually is here. And of course, this hurts to say because that bookshelf behind me is absolutely something that I love. It's something that has shaped me. But the interesting thing is, most of the books up there, although I've learned a lot from them, I've listened to them in the form of audio for the most part. For pretty much a decade now, I've been listening to audiobooks at least probably one a week or so, or at least a few a month. And then when I built this bookshelf, I actually had to go through and buy all these books, mostly for the aesthetics, to put them in groups, to remind myself what I learned from them, but it wasn't each page has been read. I've been listening. In fact, for many of them, because they're mostly nonfiction books and I was using it a lot kind of for education or additional education, I would pull up Google Docs and take notes, and I still have so many Google Docs based on these books. And of course, most of the time I've never looked at these notes again, but sometimes I've used it to synthesize the information or revisit it or share it. And I'm trying to think of how else would I have actually done that? Would I have just recorded with my voice what I thought I was learning? Because that kind of works, but there's something weird about the way I want to write something down, see it on a page, rearrange it, reread it, kind of organize it, that I just don't get from recording audio. In fact, every one of these videos, I have to sit down with a bunch of ideas and script them. Google Docs is where I spend so much of my life because I have to come up with chapter markers and think about what the point is and ask myself, does this capture it? Even if I'm not reading it word for word, I'm usually doing something very close to word for word or bullets when I'm talking to you right now. But I wouldn't even be able to do it if I didn't sit down for hours, and literally hours and hours and hours, probably 3 hours or 4 hours on average for every video that I film, just to craft what I want to say, to think through what I want to say, to ask myself, does this actually make sense? I need the words on a page so that I can zoom in and zoom out and ask myself about the full context and then get in there and say, does that sentence actually read with something that might entertain or educate? And if I didn't have that, I don't know what I would do. It just feels like I'd be missing this tool that I use to build conversations and ideas. But then again, maybe artificial intelligence in the future does something like a memory palace. Maybe there's objects in the room that remind me, or there's some sort of mix of all sorts of different types of media, or maybe this is like Neuralink and it just plugs pretty much right into my brain. I don't know. I mean, reading isn't about words, it's about experiences. Often some of the best learning is done through fiction, through storytelling, through immersion. I'm always fighting with that, dichotomy about some sort of research paper that is very boring and very dry, but very detailed and following the scientific method. Or a fictional movie, something like Interstellar, where you can actually learn about black holes and gravity, but at the end of the day, it's entertaining, it's a story, and it can stick with you. It has emotional resonance. And it's not like this would be the first time humanity survived without reading. I mean, there were symbols and stuff for a long time, but we have been around for millions of years in some sort of form, and, written records might have been something we were capable of, or might be close to kind of hierarchical, symbolic understanding, but for the most part, most of history is lost because it was just told to us by our elders. Although it does seem like not a lot of progress happened until like farming and libraries in particular came together, and especially like the written word and the printing press. So, maybe it wouldn't be a way that we could actually like progress the way I'm imagining. But even in our modern day, there are people who never learned to read but still had a big impact on society. Think about Sojourner Truth, the abolitionist and women's rights activist. She was born into slavery, never had that opportunity, but still made a mark on history. James Brown, the godfather of soul, well, he was born into a world of poverty and never really got a good reading education. He had very basic understanding of how to read. Floyd Mayweather is super rich now. He's been able to build a huge career around boxing, so he's got lots of entrepreneur spirit. And although he hasn't officially talked about it, it seems like he might be suffering from something like dyslexia, and it's very hard for him to read in general. And that's the same for Richard Branson. I mean, we all know the Virgin brand, and that's his. He built that entire empire having dyslexia. Muhammad Ali also suffered from severe dyslexia, but his words could be like poetry. Like there's something still very powerful happening with his ability to understand, communicate, learn. So we can leave aside the idea of whether or not you can have an impact, be smart, contribute to society without learning to read. And given the fast pace of change, thanks to artificial intelligence, imagine what can be generated instantly in the near future, especially like a decade down the road. Instant translation, avatars that can communicate in any way, customized education for each person. You can imagine in the future, any child that says, I've got this idea for some piece of software, some piece of technology, some change that they want to see in the world, can just start talking to their artificial intelligent assistant. But to switch gears, if you wanted to argue why we really do need reading, even with the most advanced AI, maybe even like 100 years into the future, why would kids still need to learn to read, at least in the one basic language? Like, I would argue that there's something about the cognitive development that happens just simply through the brain being formed in the early years by seeing the words on the page that becomes really important for just having a better life when you get older, right? Like maybe there's something about the process of decoding symbols, words, that stimulates like cognitive development in a way that you just can't get away without. Maybe critical thinking is the ability to put that on the page. Like the best argument was what I was talking about before, how when I type things out, I need to see it and rearrange it. Maybe I need that symbolic visualization, and something like emojis or storytelling, even if I can rearrange it, even if it's super advanced, just won't ever do. And if that's the case, outsourcing your critical thinking to an AI is pretty much the last thing you could ever do. Like you really don't want to outsource your critical thinking skills. And the next argument would just be having imagination. Like maybe you need to see something. Maybe it's about our historic connection, because if you want to learn about Egypt or Rome, they used written record. And if we can't understand that, then maybe you can't actually connect with their best form of recording their lives. I mean, maybe there's an argument for like historic connection. This one I'm kind of like on the fence, but if we actually want to learn about the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, they used symbols, they used a language to actually write down what they did, what they knew, and you have to read that to get the closest interpretation from what they left. However, arguably artificial intelligence could put together simulations of what it was like in Egypt and Rome and Greece in ways that we could never really glean just from the words. Also, maybe there's emotion that if we recreated it, wouldn't be the same as what they felt when they wrote it. So really the choice of words that they made might convey certain types of emotions that could be lost. But then again, like an avatar of somebody from Rome or Greece actually reading a poem to us, maybe in the native language or maybe translated, but the AI is doing its best to like show what that person probably looked like, how they were dressed, the environment they were in. That might make you feel the poem in a way that reading it didn't also. Or maybe you have a strong imagination and it's the exact opposite and you got more from letting your mind create everything. A good argument though that I do kind of buy into is just simply independence. Like, I think just being independent means sometimes you want to be able to read. Like, you just don't want the AI to always be there to interpret, to hallucinate, to change, to update. You want to get close to the truth. It's about personal independence. And with that personal independence, the ability to actually read the words means less manipulation. So what would a universal AI education look like without any reading involved? I mean, this is speculative, but I can certainly imagine an oral debate being a big part of it. The way we sit around and like drink wine and hang out with friends and discuss things to learn, like maybe that's what school looks like. With AI there to essentially score us or make us think about times when we're using illogical jumps. If we start referencing some of our knowledge and it's not factual, it can correct us on the fly. And from there, we develop incredible argumentative skills. And maybe we can even bring all sorts of visual mediums into our arguments in the future where we say, hey, like, let me tell you a story, but also AI generates all of the extra things we need to communicate better than just our voice. If what you want from education is to take children, help them grow up so that they're productive in society, that they contribute in some way, well then real world challenges can be augmented with AI the entire time. Or if what we end up with in a future, which I sort of suspect is like UBI and AI can do all the hard labor for us, well then human connection, social intelligence, like sitting with the people in your neighborhood who are lonely is one of the most valuable contributions you might be able to make to the future of our society. Mathematics, science, coding, in a sense that can be offloaded because what matters is going to be people. Like a robot looking at somebody in the eye, understanding them and listening to them might do okay for a while, but I think that human connection is going to be so important, along with some general critical thinking skills, so you don't just end up in these hype bubbles or you end up believing super weird things. Like critical thinking along with social IQ, or what they call EQ, seem to be like really what we should try to build now to prepare for that future, but in the future will be truly essential. Another thought I had was just to flip that on its head. Like, what if in the future artificial intelligence helps us develop a better language and a better writing system than anything that exists today? I mean, in some sense, I'm really fascinated just by like emoticons and then emojis working their way so deeply into our society because, you know, like a little smiley face, a crying face, like the little monocle, like, I'm thinking, that does a way better job than like typing that stuff out. Like maybe that keeps going and language becomes something different, or their words or their letters or their shapes, or we end up with way more characters, or it becomes more universal. Like AI could probably help us with all of this. And then you can ask yourself, what is lost? Like if you took the Bible and you translated it into emojis, is that good enough? I mean, I would read it in English, like it's already been translated multiple times. Now translate that subscribe button, help me get to my next goal, 8,000 subscribers. I'm out.